Today, we're going to do something complicated. You ever do something complicated? We're going to ask a question, and we're going to study a whole bunch of people's names, people who were kings from long ago, and it's their names aren't important. The question I'm going to deal with is, how does God bring about his plans for the future? Is that an important question? I think it is, and we can learn something out of Daniel chapter 11. It's a complicated chapter. I'm going to try and go through it quickly because we don't need to remember that some queen's name was Bernice or something like that. That's not important. What is important is God's predictions came to pass, right? And so Daniel chapter 10, an angel whose face shone like lightning. Ever seen an angel whose face shone like lightning? It was scary. Daniel passed out. It was more than he could handle. And he came to explain visions of the future to Daniel. And so Daniel is, he was taken hostage 70 years earlier to Babylon. He could count to 70, and he knew that the prophet Ezekiel said in 70 years the people are going to go back. So he was trying to figure this all out, and he was part of the scene that God brought some of the Jews back to the land that had been, taken by Babylon many years before. So how does God know what will happen? I love this verse in the Bible. Surely the Lord God does nothing without revealing his secret counsel to his servants, the prophets. Notice the word secret. How come it's secret if he's telling you? Well, everybody that reads the Bible don't believe it. A lot of people say, well, they have excuses for something happens, but he tells you his plans in advance. If somebody comes to you and says, I think God made the COVID-19 pandemic, do you find that in the Bible? How do you come to that conclusion? It may be a natural thing. There's lots of reasons why it could happen. Don't blame God for something he didn't say he's going to do. If he says he's going to do it, then something's going to happen, and you're going to say, hey, that's really amazing. God said that was going to happen. God said Jesus was going to come, and he came. He said he was going to die for our sins in the very manner in which he did. When that happens, you know God was involved in it, right? And in fact, the ability of God to tell the future is an important part of knowing that he exists. Because, so God, how does God bring about his plans recorded in the Bible? Now, have you ever read a book and the name of the book was History? The word history comes from a Greek about 2,400 years ago. His name is Herodotus. He wrote a book and he called his book Historia. And that's where we get our word history from. And this guy came up with this he wasn't sure whether it was the gods who were doing it or his men who were doing it. So he would give both sides of the story, right? He would say this king tried to figure out from these, he sent some delegates to this Greek woman who breathed some fumes and tried to predict the future, and he wasn't sure whether it was her that brought it about or whether it is his stupidity of going to war when he shouldn't have, right? So he'd tell both parts of the story, right? And he'd leave it up to the reader to figure out, was it the gods who did it, or was it this stupid king who made a dumb decision and he ended up being captured, right? So he gives you both sides. I think the Bible is more like that in some respects. There are some places in the Bible where dumb people are doing things and things happen to them. There's some places where God says he's going to do it. And it's interesting to kind of distinguish the two. And so in the Bible, people are responsible for what they do. There was a man whom Jesus chose, and he was a thief. And Jesus gave him the box to handle the money. Remember that guy named Judas? He chose this guy. Did he trick him? Did he make him go to the high priest and sell Jesus for money? But yet he did what the Bible predicted. And so that there's a kind of a complication there that is kind of hard sometimes to figure out. Sometimes God uses mighty angels to oppose Satan, and that's what Daniel chapter 10 and chapter 11 and 12 are about. This mighty angel with his face like lightning comes down, and he said he's opposing Satan and he's fighting for Israel. He's fighting against what he calls the prince of the king of Persia, and after the prince of king of Persia, then will come the prince of the king of Greece. So there's a progression here, and he says after that I got to fight with a different prince. So uh, you know the word minion. You ever heard that word? Somebody's minion. I mean, it's an underling, somebody that's under the influence of someone, right? And so Satan has minions. Some of them are politicians. Do you believe that? You know, and Satan's trying to do his thing, and yet, despite all of Satan's doings, God is also have an agenda. And that's what I want you to get out of this today. If you can get that and kind of put that together, we can go through this big list of people that died long ago, right? And so I like the word channels. He channels their willful actions so that what they will bring about the predictions that will bring about God's kingdom. The best example of that is Jesus went around and he didn't go up kissing up to the high priest, right? He would stand up in the temple and say, these guys are crooks. They're serpents. They're stealing your money. They're hypocrites. Did he do that? Did they hate him for it? Did they want to kill him? When they killed him, were they doing God's will? Did God say Jesus was going to die? So both are happening. You understand? Were they responsible for killing Jesus? Yes. Were they also doing what God wanted to do? Both are happening simultaneously. Does that make sense? God didn't trick them. He didn't lie to them. He didn't tempt them. They did what God said was going to happen, and they both happened. Okay? So think about a river. I like the word channel. What happens to a river? Can you see this river here? It's changing its channel, right? And it could be an earthquake. It could be a big flood. It could be a natural thing that it normally happens day by day. God, I like the word, God is channeling the events that people are doing so that his predictions will come to pass in the manner he said, without deceiving anybody, without tricking anybody, without tempting anybody to do evil. So here we go. And again, the example is Jesus and how he was killed for our sins, and yet that was something that was predicted in the Bible. Okay, let's kind of review a little bit. Daniel chapter 2, there's a series of Gentile empires that will rule over mankind. And they were the head was gold, that was Nebuchadnezzar. The chest and arms was silver, that was Media and Persia. And then the bronze was the center part, that was Greece. And then the iron and the legs and the toes were that was Rome. Are those empires important? They are important because the Western civilization got its heritage from those four things. When you went to school, did you ever study Homer? Did you ever read Homer, his books? I did when I was in school. Why do people care about some blind guy that lived, maybe 2,700 years ago? Because he's part of our heritage, right? That's how we think. That's how we, and so the sequence of empires is coming. Then comes this big stone, crushes the whole thing is crushed together, turns into powder. Who's going to be destroyed? Who's the iron and toes that are mixed together with clay? You think it might be us? Is there any unity in our world? Are people disunited? Are everybody fighting for their own ideas? And there's just no unity, is there? That's part of our world. I'd like to suggest to you that we are in the end era. We're close to this era. And when Jesus comes, what's going to happen? What you think is important, the wind is going to blow away like chaff. And Jesus is going to set up a kingdom. He said he will not rest until he brings justice to the nations. You see a whole lot of justice around? Wait. He's going to do it. He's going to bring justice to the nations. Okay? Okay, well, Daniel chapter 9 predicted a 490-year Jewish calendar for future events. And the last part of the calendar is 7 years. Halfway through the 7 years, there's a man who comes, desecrates the temple, causes something called the abomination that makes desolate. And yet Jesus also talked about an abomination that makes desolate that is yet future. Daniel chapter 10, this mighty angel comes, and he said, he talked about this prince of Persia and the prince of Greece. This kind of a picture, maybe we can't describe this angel. All we know is he had a golden belt and he had linen clothing and his face was like lightning. Nobody can draw a picture of that. It's impossible to visualize. But so what we're going to do today, I'm going to read this thing rather rapidly. We're going to do Daniel chapter 11 up until our era. And then next time we do this, we'll try and get the next section of Daniel chapter 11. So this is all history that is past. The one thing, if you can get out of this, God can bring about his plans even as people are doing their dumb things. Right? And he has a purpose and a reason for it. In the first year of Darius the Mede, I arose to be an encouragement and protection for him. Who's talking? This angel's talking, whose face is like lightning. Right? He says, and notice that he's encouraging and protecting a pagan king. Hello? A great angel is encouraging and protecting. Why? The prediction is that the Persians are going to take over. Are the Persians important? Do you use money? Do you ever reach in your wallet and get a card that spends money? You know who was the first empire that insisted that people use money for taxes and money for trade and money for everything? Was the Persians. The Persians were a very important part of our heritage. And now I will tell you the truth. 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia. Then a 4th will receive far more riches than all. As soon as he becomes strong through his riches, he will rise the whole against the realm of. So it doesn't mean there's only 3 more kings. There's a 4th after that. The 4th guy is going to be very rich. And he says, and you ever heard the word marathon? You ever watched a marathon race or something like that? Well, Darius the Great, he tried to invade Greece. He went to this battle of Marathon and he lost the battle. It was on the shore of a beach. His ships came up there and he ended up, his son Xerxes, who was very powerful and rich, he raised a huge army. He had 3,000 ships. That's a lot of ships, isn't it? The American Navy has nothing even close to that, right? And he went to invade. There were 3 battles. Thermopylae, you may have heard that name. He won that one, but at great cost. Salamis was a naval battle. He lost that one really badly. And then next year he lost the battle of Plataea, where his army was destroyed. And so he lost out to the Greeks. The Greeks weren't important great empires. They were little city-states. Each city had its own democracy and stuff like that. But the Greeks won. By the way, this is a picture of a Greek trireme. They had about 170 men rowing 3 rows of oars. They had maybe 10 sailors on there who managed the rudder and sometimes hoisted the sails. They had a ram on the front of a big bronze ram, and they would ram into you and sink you by just jamming into you, right? And they had a few Marines on top. And these guys, they had a pillow they sat on, and they greased the bottom of the pillow with probably lard from a calf or something, right? So that they could slide their butt across the seat so they could row with their legs. You ever watch a rower? He rows with his legs. You got more strength in your legs. These guys were tough. You know what they did to the Xerxes' navy? They wiped it out. They smashed into it. Xerxes was up on the hill watching the battle. And as he watched the battle, he was losing really big time. And then he saw one of his ships that rammed another ship. And he said, man, that ship is the queen of Halicarnassus. She was the one woman that was out there with her ship. And he says, a very famous saying, he said, my women fight like men and my men fight like women. Because he lost the battle. Actually, she rammed the wrong ship. She accidentally rammed one of her own ships. Right. So, but anyway, this battle made a big difference. Because of this battle, you and I think like Greeks today, right? I mean, it made a tremendous difference. Then in verse 3, a mighty king will arise and he will rule with great authority. and do as he pleases. But as soon as he arises, his kingdom will be broken up and parceled out to the four winds of the sky, but not to his descendant, nor according to his authority, which he wielded, for his sovereignty will be uprooted and be given to others besides them. So who is this guy? This is Alexander the Great. Okay? Alexander the Great won his first battle when he was 17 years old. You know any 17 years old that know how to win a battle? You know, this guy was, he breathed and thought and everything military. He was a genius at military. But not only, he never won, he would go against, in the battle of Gaugamela, he had 1 million men standing and protected, and he had 40,000 little men, and he says, I can take these guys on. And he did. And he had tremendous, he not only could make decisions in battle, but he had self-confidence. He knew he was going to win. He didn't doubt it one bit. And once in this one battle, he up in what is now Turkey, a guy came and smashed the top of his helmet with a battle axe. And he chopped off he had these big white plumes on top of his helmet. So everybody knew who he was. He wasn't in the back saying charge. He was in the front saying follow me. Okay. So he was out there. A guy did a battle axe on his helmet. Everybody knew who he was. They were all shooting at him. And yet he had this tremendous confidence. And it's very interesting. How did he get this confidence? When he went to capture Jerusalem, the story is recorded that he told when he got there, he said, when we get to Jerusalem, we're going to kill these guys. We're going to kill the high priest. The high priest came out, put on his fancy robes, came out there and went to meet him. When he saw the high priest, he bowed down to him. And his general said to him, I thought we were going to kill this guy. What are you bowing down to him for? And he said, I saw a guy dressed in that same clothing. And back when I was in Macedonia, and I was thinking, how am I going to fight the Persians? That man came in a vision and told me, I will give you the triumph. I'll help you, and you're going to win these battles, and you're going to beat the Persians, and you'll be the super king. And he said, and he had confidence because he had a vision. I wonder where that vision came from. Right? Why was that guy in the vision dressed like the high priest of Israel? Right? Is that interesting? So then, verse 5, then the king of the south, now here we go, we got these two kings, king of the south, king of the north. These are the divisions of the kingdom after Alexander died. He was 33 years old when he died, and he got some kind of fever and died, right? He'd been wounded many times, but he didn't die of wounds, he just died of some sickness. Then the king of the south will grow strong, along with one of his princes who will gain ascendancy over him and obtain dominion, and his dominion will be a great dominion indeed. Now, these are the two guys here. One is Ptolemy the First. He's one of the generals that worked for Alexander. He went down and took Egypt and said, I'm going to be the king of Egypt. His underling, a guy named Seleucus, who used to be a general that was of a lower rank than Ptolemy, he ended up helping Ptolemy at first, but then he went off and he had some battles and he got involved. He ended up with a bigger empire. And so his empire was the green one here. You see that green one? Right? That's the king of the north, right? The little red one, that's the king of the south. Okay? You get those two now? You notice what's in between them? Little nation of Judah. You see that? Right? You think when these guys were fighting each other, they were tromping right through Judah? So there's battles that are going on that were predicted in Daniel hundreds of years before. This is what happens. Seleucus ends up with the green guy. There were other little empires, some of his other guys, but the battles that are going on here, there's talking about the king of the north, the king of the south. And we know that the king of the south is Egypt because it tells us he is Egypt, okay? After some years, they will form an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to carry out a peaceful arrangement. Now, if you wanted to make a peace treaty in those days, what you did, you gave this other king your daughter, and she became the new queen. And then you and your grandchildren were the same grandchildren that the other king had. And it was some kind of way to get the two kingdoms to be joined together and make a nice peaceful thing that we don't have to fight each other one of our grandchildren will be able to run both our kingdoms. It was a way, by the way, you know anybody in the Old Testament who did that? Solomon had how many wives? Many of his wives were made that way because he was trying to make peace treaties with people, right? So here's what's going on. He's going to give this girl to this other older king, but she will not retain her position of power, nor will he remain with his power, but she will be given up along with those who brought her in, and the one who sired her, as well as he who supported her in that area. Now, what happened? Ptolemy II, by the way, Ptolemy II is the guy that translated the first 5 books in the Bible into Greek. Is he an important guy? He paid a lot of money to the Jews. I want that in my library. I need the Old Testament in my library. He paid a tremendous amount of money to bribe these guys to translate it into Greek. So is he important? I think he was, but he was still a pagan, right? And he gave his young daughter, her name was Bernice, to marry Antiochus II, who was the king of the north, right? And the part of the peace treaty was divorce your wife and then marry this one, make her the queen. You think the first wife was happy about that? You know, they said to her, hey, we're making a peace treaty for the benefit of the country. To make our countries great again, I'm divorcing you, right? And she was pretty upset, right? So what do you think she did? Her and her sons got together. They killed the old king, and they killed the new wife that had come in and placed him. They poisoned her, and they got rid of the whole thing. So it didn't work out. Is that an interesting little story? Did they do that on their own? Was it their plan? You know, were they trying to figure out a way how to make the kingdom bigger without too much wars? We'll use this Bernice girl to go and do this stuff, and she ends up dying. By the way, the wife that was pushed out, her name was Laodice. Have you ever heard of the city of Laodicea? It was named after her. Okay, in the Bible, in Revelation, there's a church in the city of Laodicea. Her husband had conquered a town, and he renamed it after her. But she was an irate wife. She was not happy at all that she got kicked out for a younger woman. So she took care of business and killed them all, right? Not unexpected, is it? Did God kill them? No, they did it, right? But she had a younger brother. But one of the descendants of her line, that's her younger brother, will arise in his place, and he will come against the army and enter the fortress of the king of the north, and he will deal with them and show great strength. Now, this is maybe Bernice is her picture over here. Remember, if you can tell what a Greek king is, because they had a gold band around their forehead, or around their head. They took a piece of woven cloth and they mixed it with some shreds of gold, and they tied it around their head. So if you see the guy with that gold band, he's a king, right? She was a queen. She's got the emblem for the snake of Egypt up there. And this guy, Ptolemy III, he took 62,000 soldiers, 6,000 horsemen, 102 elephants, 246 BC. He went in, I'm going to take vengeance for you killing my sister. You think he wanted to do that? Probably. He was mad, right? Did God make him do it? No. Was it natural? Was it predicted in the scripture? Yes. Okay. So he goes up there, and also their gods and their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold, he will take into captivity into Egypt, and he on his part will refrain from the king of the north for some years. So what did he do? Bernice's brother, Ptolemy III, captured 40,000 talents of silver. That's 1,150 tons of silver. That's a lot of money, isn't it? I mean, if you had pickup trucks and each one was loaded with 3/4 of a ton of silver, right? You'd have to have thousands of pickup trucks, wouldn't you? That's a lot of silver. He captured all this gold. He captured the Egyptian idols that had been carried away by Cyrus the Great's son 300 years before, took them back to Egypt, put them back in the temples. So he became famous because he brought the idols back. The Bible predicted he would do that hundreds of years before. Did he want to do it? Yeah, he did it, right? Why did he do it? Because you treated my sister badly, right? So then the latter will enter the realm of the king of the south, but he will return to his own land. So then Seleucus II tried to invade Egypt in 240 BC, didn't succeed. Again, notice the little gold band around his head? He's a king. He's wearing a crown, right? And his sons will mobilize and assemble a multitude of great force, and one of them will keep on coming and overflow and pass through, that he may again wage war to his fortress. So here we got two more kings, different generation. Antiochus III is the guy on the guy in the white thing. Ptolemy IV, he kind of looks like a chubby guy. He's the Egyptian. They were all Greeks. They spoke Greek, right? They were really Greeks. They claimed to be kings of Syria and Egypt, but they had conquered these kingdoms, originally conquered by Alexander the Great. So they had a spat in 221 BC. They repeatedly battled over a place like Raphia. Have you ever watched the news and they're talking about the Gaza, and there's an entrance to the Gaza that's called Rafah? That's what they were fighting over, right? There was a fortress there, and they were fighting over this fortress, and the fortress kind of guarded the entrance to Egypt. And Ptolemy IV, with an army of 70,000 soldiers, 5,000 cavalry, 62 elephants, he took Raphia back. So these one guy takes the town, the other guy says, I'm taking it back. So they're fighting over it. Lots of people are getting killed. Did God kill them? No. Did they want to fight each other? Yes. Why? Because they wanted to get the other guy's kingdom, right? And by the way, Greek soldiers, they had different kinds of infantry, but the primary form of the infantry, they had 20-foot spears. So if the spear was here, it would be sticking up into the upper floor, right? So when they marched with their spears upright, but when they charged, the front row ranks dropped their spears down. And so when they charged, they practiced running at full speed, right close together. When they hit you like a ton of bricks, right? But there was one problem with this. Once the guy lowered his spears, he couldn't maneuver anymore, right? He couldn't turn because the spears were running down between the ranks, right? So once they decided they were going to charge, they were locked into place, and the Romans eventually figured out, we wait until they charge and then we hit them on the side, right? So then the king of the south will be enraged. Who's the king of the south? He's the Egyptian guy, a Greek king down there. And he will be enraged and go forth and fight with the king of the north. Then the latter will raise a great multitude, but the multitude will be given into the hand. And when the multitude is carried away, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cause tens of thousands to fall, yet he will not prevail. So again, these guys are fighting. They're going back and forth because they want to be an Alexander the Great. They want to make a great kingdom again, and they only had a part of the kingdom. They want the other guy's part. And in the battle, Ptolemy IV killed 10,000 soldiers, 300 cavalry, 5 elephants, and took 4,000 prisoners. So these are nasty battles. You think this was important for the Jews who are living there in Jerusalem? These armies are tramping back and forth through their land, and they read the book of Daniel, and they say, I wonder which one of them is this one. They knew what was happening. They understood it because it was predicted, and they said, hunker down, here comes another one, right? And it wasn't God that was doing it, but they had to endure it because these were their masters. These are the guys that taxed them, right? So for the king of the north will again raise a greater multitude than the former, and after an ordeal of some years, he will press on with a great army and much equipment. Equipment, by the way, is an important part of that statement, right? Now, in those days, many will rise up against the king of the south. The violent ones among your people, who are your people, Daniel's people, are the Jews, and will also lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, but they will fall. So here's, at this point in history, something has changed. Really big time changes. There was a guy named Hannibal. You ever heard of Hannibal? Hannibal had one eye. I wonder why a soldier who goes into battle has one eye. Probably somebody shot his eye out with an arrow, right? You're running around shooting stuff, people hurt you, right? Hannibal fought for 16 years in Rome. Eventually he went back to his Carthage, and this guy named Scipio Africanus, one of the consuls of Rome, went down and beat him up. He eventually had to run away. Where did he run to? He ran to the king of the north. Heard that statement in the Bible? He's in the king of the north. Then there's a whole bunch of battles. Now all of a sudden there's a new power coming in. the power is Rome. It's not identified here by name, but the Romans are coming in, and so now there's a different equation. So that's Hannibal with his one eye. Remember, he's the guy who crossed the Alps with the elephants. You ever heard that when you ever read the history where he crossed the Alps with elephants and went down there, beat up some of the Romans so badly he had, in one battle, just the Roman rings, gold rings from he filled bushel baskets up with the guys he killed. I mean, he's a pretty good general, right? And then this guy, Philip V of Macedonia, who controlled, he was not the king of the north. He started trying to do some stuff. He wanted to extend his empire. He ended up fighting with the Romans. The Romans defeated him. And then he took the Egyptian garrisons near Sidon, the king of the north did. And this is Philip V. He lost to the Romans, okay? All of these guys, they're not identified by name in the Bible, but they actually happened, right? Then the king of the north will come and cast up a siege ramp and capture a well-fortified city. The city he captured was the city of Sidon, which today is in Lebanon, right? And he had to use siege engines to break into the city. And the forces of the south will not stand, even their choicest troops, for there will be no strength to make a stand. But he who comes against him will do as he pleases, and no one will withstand him, and he will also stay in the beautiful land and with destruction in his hand. In other words, this guy, by the way, the Greeks had impressive siege engines. They had, I don't know, have you ever used a slide rule? You know, long ago, people had slide rules. They had some kind of a slide rule that would tell them where the rock would hit. I don't know how it worked. I think that they had a balance, that they would weigh the rock on one end and move the balance around to figure out some way that they could do a proportion or something to figure out. But they had really amazing ability. The artillery officer could say, I want to knock that guy off that wall that's standing up there, and he could do it with a rock, right? I mean, it was how they did it, I don't know. Nobody knows, but they did it. And so that's part of this siege that happened. The king of the north, king of the south, fighting in what is now Lebanon, right? And he will set his face to come with the power of his whole kingdom, bringing with him a proposal of peace, which he will put into effect, and he will give him the daughter of women to ruin it. Again, we have another deal going on, right? Hey, let's make a deal. Instead of fighting, I'll give you my daughter, right? And she's going to be on my side, and maybe she'll be a spy in your palace, and she'll help me to win against you. You understand what this lady's name was Cleopatra. It's not the Cleopatra that you've seen in the movies. That was a different Cleopatra, centuries later. She was Cleopatra the First. She looks kind of pretty, doesn't she? She's got the gold band in her head. She's a queen, right? She goes to Egypt. They send this girl down there. So we're going to give you this new wife over here. Only problem was she kind of liked her new husband. And she felt like maybe he was right, and my crummy old dad sold me off as a slave, and I don't like him, and I'm going to stick with my husband, and I'm not going to help you. Could things like that happen? I don't blame her for doing that, right? But so the plan to find a solution to these wars with this Cleopatra the First didn't work. Is that an interesting story? Did God do it? No, they were doing it. Did God predict they were doing it? Yes. How did it happen? Angels are fighting around up there trying to make sure the predictions of God are going to happen. Then he will turn his face to the coastlands and capture many, but a commander will put a stop to his scorn against him. Now, this is Antiochus III, and the commander is not a king. It says a commander. And so what's the difference between a king and a commander? Well, Antiochus III is the guy on the right. He's the guy with the gold band in his head. The guy without a gold band in his head, he's a Roman general. And his name was Scipio Africanus. His brother, Scipio Asiaticus, had beat Hannibal, right? And now by the way, the Romans had this wonderful idea, we don't want kings. So we elect 2 kings every year. They call them consuls. And the 2 kings, each one reigned for 1 month, and then the next one would reign the next month. So they had each one reign for 6 months. The word veto was a Latin word. You could veto the other guy. They didn't want any one person to have total power. Do you think governments today try to do the same thing? Why did they do it? We follow the Roman system, don't we? We have three-part governments, just like the Romans did. So this Scipio guy, he came out there. He was actually had already believed, but he was there on the scene. And what happened, they had this big battle, and the Romans, the battle started because a donkey ran across the river. They were both drinking water out of the same river. And somebody tried to recover the donkey, and they started, it wasn't a planned battle. And in the middle of the battle, the Romans had this wonderful plan. Don't shoot at the guys in front of you. Shoot over the top of them at the elephants on the other side. And the elephants panicked. The elephants charged. The elephants charged their own army. And so they won because the elephants charged the wrong direction. Is that an interesting story? You know, this Roman guy beat up this Greek guy. And what did he do? Well, moreover, he will repay him for his scorn. So he will turn his face toward his own land and will fall and be found no more. Antiochus III died. But his son, in his place will arise one who will send an oppressor through the jewel of his kingdom, yet within a few days he will be shattered, though not in anger nor in battle. What the Romans did, they said to these Greek guys, they said, okay, you lost the battle, you're going to pay reparations. We need so many tons of silver given to us. So the next king had to run around and collect a lot of money, raise taxes to pay the Romans off. People didn't like him, so they poisoned him and got rid of him, right? So this is Seleucus IV, the guy who was trying to raise taxes, right? He failed. People didn't like him. Then in his place, a despicable person will arise, whom the honor of the kingdom has not been conferred, but he will come during a period of peace and will seize the kingdom with intrigue. Now, this is the deceiver, right? This is Antiochus IV. He called himself God with us. God manifest. That was his name. He is a kind of a picture of the Antichrist who will come in the end, all right? Who claims he's Christ, right? So this guy, he's a deceiver. The overflowing forces will be flooded away before him and shattered, and also the Prince of the Covenant. The Prince of the Covenant is a high priest. He went into Jerusalem. He killed the high priest. Said, well, I'm going to put my own priest in here. We're gonna get you guys to worship the pagan gods. We're not going to let you worship your God. So this is Antiochus IV. God manifest, he called himself, right? And after an alliance will be made with him, he will practice deception. Do you think will the Antichrist practice deception? He's a model for the Antichrist, right? And he will go up and practice deception and gain power with few people. So he cons people. He's a con artist, right? And so what does he do? During the days of tranquility, there's kind of a peace going on. He will enter the riches of the realm, and he will accomplish what his fathers never did, nor his ancestors. He will distribute plunder, booty, and possessions among them, and he will devise schemes against strongholds, but for a while. So he's a con artist. He's running around trying to figure out how to make peace treaties, and he's capturing stuff that he didn't have to fight for, right? He will stir up his strength and courage against the king of the south. Who's the king of the south? He's the guy in Egypt, right? And with a large army, so the king of the south will mobilize an extremely large army and a mighty army for war against him, but he will not stand, for schemes will be devised against him. So here's what happened. There was a battle. Pelusium was another fortress to get into Egypt. You had to go through the desert to get to Egypt, and they were fighting over this fort. 170 BC, Ptolemy IV, there were two Ptolemies in Egypt. There were two brothers that were fighting each other who wanted to be the king. So this deceiving guy, Antiochus IV, he tries to get in there and con these two guys. He says, I'll help you to be the king. I'm going to help you. I'm going to assist you. I'm bring my army in here to help you beat up your brother so you could be the king. But he didn't care about those brothers. He wanted to be the king himself. He planned to kill them both, right? So he's a deceiver. And but Antiochus IV, he says, I'll help you gain the kingdom for yourself. And those who eat his choice food will destroy him, and his army will overflow, but many will fall down slain. Again, there's battles going on between these Egyptians. What's this affecting? The little nation of Judah. Their high priest was killed. They're being killed. people are tromping through their land, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And they could read in the book of Daniel, and they say, oh, Daniel predicts this is going. Look what's happening. It's happening. It's happening, right? So, as for both kings, their heart will be intent on evil. They will speak lies at the same table. Do you know what people do when they speak lies at the same table? They call that diplomacy, isn't it? Right? They sit there and they talk to each other and they tell promises about this that they never intend to do. Same thing back then as they do today. But it will not succeed, for the end will come when it is appointed. So this guy is not the Antichrist. There's still a further Antichrist that's going to come, but he's a kind of a model for him. And this is what he does. He will return to his land with much plunder. His heart will be set against the Holy Covenant. He will take action and return to his own land. What's he doing against the Holy Covenant? He says, any Jew who practices Judaism, anyone who has a copy of the Old Testament, we're going to kill you. Anybody who goes to the temple to worship the God of Israel, we're going to kill you. You have to worship my gods, and you have to practice all kinds of crazy stuff. At the appointed date, he will return and come into the south. So here he's back marching into Egypt. But on this occasion, it will not turn out as before, for ships of Kittim will come against him. Therefore, he will be disheartened and return and be enraged at the Holy Covenant. The Holy Covenant is the promise God made to the Jews, and take action, so he will come back and show regard for those who forsake the Holy Covenant. Now here's what happened. This guy, Antiochus IV, he actually gets all the way up to the outside of the city of Alexandria. And he's bringing his equipment in there. He's going to knock down the walls. I'm going to take Alexandria. About that time, a ship comes into the harbor. Interesting. The Bible predicted a ship will come from the west. It's a Roman ship. And on the ship is a former consul from Rome. His name was Gaius Pompilius Laenas. That sounds like a Roman name, doesn't it? And he gets in there, and the king he comes marching over there. I'm an emissary for Rome. And the king says, hi, how are you? He said, no, I'm not shaking your hand. I'm giving you this letter from the Roman Senate, and you better read it right now because it's a letter from Rome. And the Romans had beat up his father really badly, and he knew he couldn't fight him. And so he says, he read the letter, and he says, abandon this enterprise, go back to your country. You're not allowed. We deny you the right to fight the king of Egypt. And so he's pretty embarrassed about this. He says, I have to talk to my council. He said, no, you're not going to talk to your council. He took his cane and he drew a circle around him on the sand. And he says, I want an answer right now before you step out of that circle. You tell me whether it's going to be war with Rome or not. Because if you step out of the circle without telling me, I'm going to send back to the Roman Senate, and they're going to send their army, and they're going to beat you up. You think he was happy about that? It was predicted in the scripture that it was going to happen. Isn't that interesting? And forces from him will arise and desecrate the sanctuary fortress and do away with the regular sacrifice. They will set up the abomination of desolation. They sacrifice the pig in the temple. They set up Zeus in the temple. This is Antiochus IV. That's his coin. And by smooth words, he will turn to godlessness those who act wickedly towards the covenant. But the people who know their God will display strength and take action. Those who have insight among the people will give understanding to the many. Yet they will fall by sword and by flame and by captivity and by plunder for days. Now when they fall, they will be granted a little help. Many will join with them in hypocrisy. Some of those who have insight will fall in order to purge and make them pure until the era of the end that is yet appointed. What's going on here is when he got back to the land of Judah, he started forcing the pagan religion on the Jews. Some of the Jews said, we're not going to put up with this. They started fighting. They hadn't been fighting before. They'd been paying their taxes. But when they said, okay, we're going to desecrate your temple, we're going to force you to worship Zeus. We call Zeus Jupiter, right? And so there was a guy who came up. His name was Judas. They called him the Hammer. And he was Maccabeus. Maccabeus is the word hammer in their language, and he was quite a warrior. And he was a guerrilla type warrior. Right? He didn't have a big army, but he ran around beating up the Greeks right and left, and he did some pretty amazing stuff. And in the end, he kicked the Greeks out, and he cleansed the temple, and they restored their religion. Okay, this was predicted. Okay, why did God send this mighty angel to explain this stuff to Daniel? Well, he wrote it down. People were able to read it. They knew that God had a plan. And even the plan sometimes involved bad guys coming and beating them up. And in the process of beating up, the people were purified. Some of their ideas that we can also worship God and the pagans, it didn't work out, right? And to give them hope, to purge the unbelieving Jews, allow the predicted empires to form. And so think about it. Did you go to school? Most of us went to school. How did you learn to think in school? What is the model of to think in school? You learned to think like a Greek. Why? Because Greeks invented this philosophy way of thinking where you had little assumptions and you build on it. And you build a science and you build all this stuff. You learned that, right? Why did it happen? These Greeks, they controlled the world for a while, and they were so powerful and so great that their way of thinking came all the way down. If you live in China or Russia or North Korea, you still learn to think like a Greek. Because that was, why does God let these guys do that? Someday Jesus is going to come, and when he does, the triumph will be complete. It will be total. The freedom will be total. I don't think people are going to have politicians telling them what to do or paying taxes. They're going to be free. The pollutions are going to be gone. The terrible things that we can't solve, Jesus is coming. He's got a plan. Part of that plan was setting up, let Satan do his numbers, bring about this empire. So when Jesus comes, he's going to bring an end to it and bring justice and truth to the world. That's a big, long story, isn't it? I hope there's no tests, right? Nobody. You don't have to know who Bernice is or any of that stuff. But can God do what he's doing? That's what I want you to think about. God has a plan. He has a program. He's going to do it because he said he's going to do it. But that doesn't mean that other people aren't doing their thing at the same point. All right?